What happens when the world's biggest boy band collides with the unpredictable energy of Tampa? We know BTS for flawless performances, but what really goes down when the official cameras stop rolling? Prepare for a wild ride as we unearth the most chaotic, unscripted moments from their legendary Floor to Stop, who turned a serious soundcheck into a hysterical comedy roast. Which member completely lost his mind over a random backstage mishap? Brace yourself for the ultimate behind-the-scenes exposure, because these 7 funniest BTS recordings in Tampa will absolutely make your day. Are you ready to witness their true, unfiltered chaos? Let the countdown begin. Number 7. Jeon. The missing sneaker, absolute panic, hilarious. Picture this vividly in your mind. The sweltering, oppressive heat of Tampa, Florida, is practically melting the asphalt outside the colossal stadium, radiating a shimmering mirage of humidity that clings to everything it touches. Yet, deep inside the labyrinthine, heavily air-conditioned concrete bowels of the backstage area, a completely different, infinitely more entertaining kind of meltdown is spectacularly unfolding. It was the crucial afternoon of their highly anticipated sold-out show, the atmosphere thick with that unique, intoxicating pre-concert electricity. A chaotic, high-stakes symphony composed of screeching wardrobe racks, frantic makeup artists wielding brushes like magic wands, and the distant, rib-rattling thud of the sound crew testing the massive, towering stadium speakers. We all know Jeon, the beloved eldest member of BTS, globally revered as worldwide handsome. A man who usually radiates an aura of breathtaking confidence, impeccable grace, and charmingly awful dad jokes that somehow cross cultural boundaries. However, this particular, highly classified leaked recording shows a completely different, wonderfully unhinged side of him that had the entire touring crew doubling over in breathless laughter. The unauthorized video starts with a shaky, handheld camera, likely operated by one of the stealthy documentary staff members, capturing Jeon standing dead center in the middle of his lavishly decorated dressing room. He is wearing exactly half of his elaborate stage outfit, a blindingly sparkly, custom-made designer jacket that catches every lumen of the dressing room lights, immaculate, gravity-defying hair, one pristine, meticulously customized white sneaker, and one solitary, tragic black sock. His face, usually a flawless canvas of sculpted, magazine cover perfection, is violently twisted into an expression of sheer, theatrical agony. Where is it? Where did it go? Did it miraculously sprout legs and decide to take a vacation to Miami without me? He shrieks, his voice soaring and cracking into that iconic, squeaky, windshield wiper high pitch that seasoned armies know all too well and secretly live for. He is frantically, methodically tearing apart the dressing room like a man possessed, aggressively flipping over plush velvet sofa cushions, intensely interrogating an innocent, bewildered potted fern in the corner, and passionately questioning a heavily caffeinated, severely sleep-deprived production assistant who looks like he fervently wishes the concrete floor would just open up and swallow him whole. The true emotional core of this glorious moment isn't just the slapstick comedy of the situation, it's the profound, grounding realization of their sheer humanity. Right here, in this shaky footage, is a bona fide global superstar, a man who has eloquently addressed world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly and single-handedly sold out the biggest, most prestigious stadiums across the globe, utterly and completely defeated by the mysterious disappearance of a single piece of footwear. You can distinctively hear the stifled, wheezing giggles of the rogue cameraman as Jeon dramatically drops to his knees in the center of the room, his famous broad shoulders heaving in exaggerated, Oscar-worthy despair, acting as if the loss of this sneaker is a Shakespearean tragedy of epic, world-ending proportions. The recording elevates from merely funny to absolutely legendary when RM, the group's steadfast leader, walks into the frame, clutching a heavy clipboard and looking exactly like an exhausted corporate project manager desperately trying to herd a group of highly energetic, unpredictable cats. RM's face immediately drops into an expression of profound weariness as he quickly assesses the bizarre situation before him. His eldest Hyung, dramatically mourning the absence of a shoe on the linoleum floor, while precious, expensive soundcheck minutes aggressively tick away. Hyung, what on earth are you doing? We literally have to go out to the stage in less than 5 minutes. RM sighs deeply, aggressively rubbing his temples in a specific way that heavily suggests this kind of absurd crisis is a daily, regular occurrence on tour. Jeon, entirely unwilling to break character when he is this fully committed to a theatrical bit, dramatically points an accusing, trembling finger at the empty air. Namjoon, someone has deliberately sabotaged me. They recognize the devastating power of my asymmetrical footwear, and they are desperately trying to extinguish my blinding shine before I even step on stage. The sheer unadulterated absurdity of the statement, delivered with absolute, unwavering, deadpan seriousness, causes RM's carefully maintained professional facade to violently crack, and a genuine, brilliant, dimpled smile breaks through his exhaustion, lighting up the room. This exact dynamic is the hidden magic of BTS that the highly polished, meticulously edited music videos rarely manage to capture. It's the raw, unfiltered, deeply authentic brotherhood where they can effortlessly switch from being intense, laser-focused, world-class performers to bickering, dramatic siblings in a fraction of a second. As the raw video steadily progresses, the escalating chaos acts like a magnet, attracting the other members. Jimin subtly peeks his head around the heavy doorframe, his eyes instantly turning into adorable, squished little crescents as he bursts into his signature, high-pitched, full-body laugh, literally collapsing against the hallway wall because he finds Jin's misery so incredibly, helplessly entertaining. Jungkook, casually holding a half-eaten banana, wanders into the frame and just stares at the chaotic scene with massive, wide, unblinking doe eyes, silently processing the screaming and flying cushions like a deeply confused puppy before slowly, cautiously backing out of the room, clearly deciding he wants absolutely zero part in whatever this specific drama is. The tension in the room is palpable, but it's a wonderfully comedic tension. Will Jeon find his precious shoe? Will they genuinely have to delay the multi-million-dollar, highly coordinated Tampa soundcheck because of an unprecedented footwear malfunction? Just as the stress stage director's voice furiously crackles over the walkie-talkie, sounding dangerously close to a meltdown, a breathless stylist violently bursts into the room holding the missing, highly sought-after white sneaker like it's the Holy Grail. Jeon says, "Sigh, I found it." She pants, completely out of breath. The million-dollar question, where was it? In the mini fridge. Yes, you heard that absolutely right. Inside the heavily frosted mini fridge, nestled quite comfortably and absurdly between a perfectly aligned row of chilled, colorful sports drinks and a plastic container of fresh, sliced strawberries. The camera quickly zooms in on Jin's face, perfectly capturing a highly complex, rapid-fire sequence of emotions. Initial confusion, sudden realization, and finally, a stubborn, defiant refusal to admit any shred of fault or embarrassment. Instead of offering a sheepish apology for the massive disruption, he regally snatches the cold shoe from the stylist, slowly puts it on with the dignified grace of a reigning monarch, and loudly declares to the entire room, "See, I knew the Tampa heat was far too much for my delicate shoes. It was simply cooling off. My shoes are very intelligent, just like their owner." The entire room simultaneously erupts. Even the previously traumatized production assistant is bent double, openly crying with genuine laughter. Jeon confidently struts out of the room, his dignity somehow miraculously and bafflingly intact, leaving a loud, lingering trail of hysterical giggling in his wake. This piece of raw, unedited footage is a brilliant, undeniable testament to their emotional resilience. Constantly touring the world is notoriously grueling, isolating, and physically draining, but moments exactly like this, these spontaneous pockets of pure, unadulterated, ridiculous silliness, are their ultimate survival mechanism. It beautifully showcases how they use humor to actively diffuse the immense, crushing pressure cooker of their extraordinary reality. Number 6. RM. The God of Destruction strikes again, a $1 million mishap. Unbelievable. Imagine the staggering, monumental scale of the highly anticipated Arirang World Tour, marking BTS's triumphant and deeply emotional return to the North American stage after a grueling, years-long hiatus involving their mandatory military service. A period that had the entire global army practically holding their collective breath in eager anticipation. The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of this historic comeback event was perfectly encapsulated at the iconic Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida, a colossal venue bracing itself to host an awe-inspiring 180,000 screaming, deeply devoted fans across a wildly successful, completely sold-out weekend. The air in the city was incredibly thick, not just with the notoriously oppressive, sweltering Florida humidity that seemed determined to instantly melt any makeup product it touched, but with a palpable, electric tension that crackled and hummed through the labyrinthine backstage stadium corridors like a live, dangerously exposed electrical wire. Amidst this high-stakes, meticulously choreographed environment of controlled chaos, where hundreds of stress production crew members, stylists, and managers scurried around like frantic ants, ensuring every single pyrotechnic display, laser light, and microphone check was perfectly synchronized, we intimately find Kim Namjoon, better known to the entire world as RM. As the brilliant, fiercely intelligent, and profoundly eloquent leader of the world's biggest musical phenomenon, Namjoon constantly carries an invisible, crushing weight on his incredibly broad shoulders, consistently acting as the group's steadfast anchor, their primary English spokesperson, and the calm, rational center of the frequently chaotic BTS storm. However, lying just beneath the surface of that brilliant, philosophical mind that pens Grammy-nominated lyrics and effortlessly delivers profound, world-changing speeches at the United Nations General Assembly, lies a deeply endearing, legendary, and highly destructive alter ego that seasoned fans affectionately and somewhat fearfully refer to as the God of Destruction. This specific, heavily guarded leaked backstage recording perfectly, hilariously captures the exact, catastrophic moment when a meticulous, highly polished, and incredibly expensive world of a multi-million-dollar stadium tour spectacularly collides with Namjoon's infamous, inescapable clumsiness, creating a moment of pure, unadulterated comedic gold that the official, sanitized tour documentaries would likely heavily edit or completely censor to protect his dignity. The shaky, covert footage begins by showing RM standing in a cramped, heavily congested backstage staging area just behind the massive main screens, looking absolutely breathtaking and intimidatingly handsome in his intricately detailed, custom-tailored designer stage outfit that was specifically crafted for the tour's massive opening sequence. In his large hands, he is delicately holding a brand new, highly complex, and undoubtedly astronomically expensive custom stage prop, a beautifully sleek, futuristic, glowing LED staff specifically engineered and programmed to emit synchronized, pulsing light patterns during their highly anticipated debut live performance of the track Into the Sun. The prop was reportedly flown in directly from a high-tech engineering firm in Tokyo just days before, strictly labeled as highly fragile and essential to the choreography. Naturally, this delicate, vital piece of advanced technology was currently resting in the exact hands of the man who once famously broke a pair of sturdy sunglasses simply by trying to gently put them on his own face. The unauthorized video captures Namjoon entirely lost in his own intense, hyper-focused world, vigorously and enthusiastically practicing a dramatic, sweeping martial arts style spin move with a glowing staff, his handsome face a picture of absolute, deadly serious artistic concentration. He spins it beautifully once, twice, looking incredibly cool, majestic, and charismatic, completely oblivious to the terrified, wide-eyed stares of the nearby makeup artists and wardrobe assistants who were instinctively, silently backing away toward the walls as if he were actively juggling live, ticking grenades. Then, in a split second that seems to painfully and beautifully unfold in excruciating, cinematic slow motion, the inevitable, highly predictable disaster spectacularly strikes. The sleek, aerodynamic, heavily polished grip of the LED staff slips just a tiny fraction of an inch from his sweaty, heavily rehearsed fingers. The heavy, glowing prop forcefully launches completely out of his hands like a beautifully illuminated, highly destructive missile, soaring through the humid, heavily air-conditioned backstage air with terrifying, majestic grace and terrifying speed. The rogue camera perfectly tracks its chaotic, unpredictable trajectory as it entirely bypasses the safe, empty concrete floor and tragically, violently crashes directly into a massive, meticulously arranged, heavily catered tower of authentic, artisanal Tampa Cuban sandwiches and fresh pastries, right before ricocheting with a horrifying, aggressively expensive sounding crack into a critical, multi-thousand-dollar digital audio monitor used by the sound engineers. The immediate, raw aftermath captured on tape is a pure masterpiece of silent, devastating comedy. The intricate LED staff lies tragically broken on the cold linoleum floor, actively sparking ominously and blinking a sad, dying purple light, completely smothered in a catastrophic, messy avalanche of roasted pork, smoked ham, Swiss cheese, pickles, and bright yellow mustard. The deafening, high-energy roar of the backstage area instantly drops into a heavy, suffocating, utterly dead silence as everyone collectively holds their breath. The camera aggressively zooms in on Namjoon's face, perfectly capturing a rapid, highly complex cycle of human emotion that genuinely deserves an Academy Award for acting. Pure, unadulterated shock, followed rapidly by profound, paralyzing guilt, and finally settling into his signature, deeply nervous, incredibly adorable dimpled smile as he fully realizes the catastrophic magnitude of his latest, most expensive blunder. He slowly, awkwardly crouches down, his broad shoulders instinctively hunching up to his ears in a universal display of embarrassment, and gently pokes the sparking, sandwich-covered piece of advanced technology with a single, hesitant index finger, looking exactly like a guilty golden retriever, as if softly petting the device might miraculously reverse the devastating structural damage. The raw, unfiltered hilarity dramatically escalates 1,000% when J-Hope, famously known globally as the group's radiant sunshine and rigorous, terrifying dance leader, casually saunters into the chaotic, silent frame, rubbing his stomach, looking incredibly hungry and perfectly ready to devour his highly anticipated pre-show meal. J-Hope freezes dead in his tracks, his eyes slowly widening to the size of actual dinner plates as he takes in the apocalyptic scene of the destroyed tech, the panicked crew, and the ruined catering. But the absolute funniest, most unexpected part of the recording isn't his reaction to the expensive, shattered prop that actively threatens to ruin their massive opening choreography. It's a sheer, unadulterated, heartbreaking devastation over the violently murdered local sandwiches. J-Hope dramatically drops to his knees right beside a panicking Namjoon, letting out a loud, theatrical wail of pure agony, gently cradling a squished, mustard-covered piece of Cuban bread like a fallen comrade on a tragic battlefield, completely ignoring his profusely apologizing leader, who is frantically, desperately trying to stick the shattered pieces of the LED staff back together using a pathetic, tiny strip of silver duct tape he mysteriously produced from his deep pockets. Number 5. Suga. The Iced Americano Tragedy. A Sudden Betrayal. Hilarious. Let us pivot our focus from the high-octane, disastrously expensive prop destruction on the main stage to a much quieter, deeply personal, yet infinitely more tragic and hilarious incident unfolding near the massive, cavernous loading docks of the Raymond James Stadium, where the oppressive, thick, notoriously unforgiving Florida humidity actively hung in the air, like a heavy, suffocating, invisible wet blanket. In the highly chaotic, relentlessly fast-paced, high-pressure ecosystem of a massive BTS world tour, every single member absolutely relies on their own specific, essential coping mechanisms to survive the grueling schedule. But for Min Yoongi, globally feared and revered as the fierce, tongue technology-wielding rap god Auguste, and the brilliantly stoic producer Suga, there is only one true, undisputed lifeblood that keeps him tethered to reality. An ice-cold, impeccably brewed, intensely strong iced Americano. It is an established, universally acknowledged fact among the entire touring staff, the management, and the dedicated global army that an uncaffeinated Yoongi is a highly dangerous, profoundly grumpy, and completely unapproachable entity. A sleeping dragon that absolutely no sane crew member ever wants to accidentally wake up. This incredibly precious, highly classified, raw piece of leaked documentary footage masterfully captures what is perhaps the single most devastating, heart-wrenching, and undeniably comedic betrayal of Yoongi's entire professional career, an event that didn't involve malicious industry executives or rival musicians, but rather a remarkably bold, shockingly aggressive, and completely fearless native Tampa seagull. The shaky, handheld camera, operated by a brave, unseen documentary crew member hiding safely behind a massive stack of black touring road cases, perfectly frames Yoongi seeking a rare, precious moment of absolute solitude amidst the deafening backstage madness. He is sitting quietly on top of a heavy-duty equipment trunk placed dangerously close to the open, sun-drenched loading bay, desperately trying to catch a fleeting, momentary wisp of the salty, humid ocean breeze rolling in off the nearby Tampa Bay. He looks the absolute epitome of effortless, intimidating rock star cool, dressed impeccably in an all-black, custom designer ensemble that is entirely inappropriate for the sweltering 90-degree Florida weather. His pale, flawless skin practically glowing in the harsh afternoon sunlight, his hair perfectly styled, and in his pale hands, he gently, lovingly cradles the holy grail itself. A massive, Veni-sized, heavily iced Americano, condensation dripping slowly and beautifully down the clear plastic sides like tears of pure, unadulterated joy. For a brief, magical, incredibly peaceful 30 seconds, the raw footage captures Yoongi in a state of pure, undisturbed, meditative zen, his normally sharp, intensely observant feline eyes closed in absolute bliss as he takes a long, slow, deeply satisfying sip of the bitter, dark liquid, visibly absorbing the life-giving caffeine into his exhausted, overworked bloodstream. However, this beautiful, tranquil illusion of peace is violently, tragically shattered in a fraction of a second, perfectly highlighting the brutal, unpredictable, and downright hilarious reality of their glamorous lives. Yoongi, making the single most catastrophic, fatal error of his entire day, gently and trustingly sets his precious, life-sustaining beverage down on the edge of the metal trunk for a mere 3 seconds to quickly bend over and retie the intricate laces of his heavy, black designer combat boots. In that exact, infinitesimal window of vulnerability, the local Florida wildlife decides to ruthlessly strike with the strategic precision of a trained military operative. A massive, terrifyingly bold, gray and white Tampa seagull, boasting a wingspan that looks genuinely intimidating and eyes filled with the cold, calculating hunger of a seasoned apex predator, silently dive bombs from the high steel rafters of the stadium's concrete loading bay. The camera violently shakes as the cameraman flinches, capturing the exact, horrifying moment the feathered menace aggressively swoops down, not aiming for a discarded piece of food, but launching a direct, highly calculated, incredibly malicious physical assault on the unsuspecting plastic cup. The seagull's heavy, webbed feet violently clip the top of the straw, and with a sickening, tragic, hollow thud that seems to echo loudly through the entire backstage area, the massive cup is mercilessly toppled over. The tragic scene unfolds in what feels like excruciating, agonizing slow motion. The tightly secured plastic lid violently pops off under the immense pressure of the fall, and the dark, beautiful, highly caffeinated liquid violently erupts across the dusty concrete floor, mixing tragically with the loose gravel and rapidly seeping into the dirty asphalt, a devastating river of wasted potential and ruined dreams. The bird, immediately realizing the cup is filled with bitter liquid rather than delicious Tampa seafood, lets out a loud, obnoxiously mocking squawk that sounds suspiciously like raucous laughter and violently flaps away back into the blinding Florida sky, leaving behind a scene of utter, unparalleled destruction. The sheer, unadulterated, award-winning comedy of this legendary recording doesn't come from the spilled coffee itself, but from Min Yoongi's absolutely legendary, perfectly paralyzed, deeply existential reaction to the catastrophic tragedy. He doesn't immediately scream, he doesn't aggressively flail his arms, and he doesn't violently curse at the sky like a normal, reasonable person would. Instead, he slowly, mechanically straightens up from tying his boot, his entire body going completely, terrifyingly rigid, and he just stares downward at the rapidly expanding, dark brown puddle of his murdered Americano with an expression of profound, soul-crushing, absolute emptiness. The camera aggressively zooms in on his perfectly still face, capturing a man who is currently actively dissociating from reality, rapidly cycling through the 5 devastating stages of grief in absolute, deadpan silence, looking exactly as if he has just witnessed the tragic, untimely end of his most trusted, lifelong best friend. He sits entirely frozen for a full, uncomfortable, hilariously long 20 seconds, the silence heavy and thick, completely ignoring the frantic, terrified whispers of the nearby staff members who are slowly backing away in sheer terror, genuinely fearing that the absolute lack of caffeine will trigger an apocalyptic, earth-shattering August D-meltdown of epic proportions. When Yoongi finally, agonizingly breaks the silence, his voice is terrifyingly calm, flat, and completely devoid of any human emotion, heavily dripping with that signature, dry, deadpan sarcasm that the fans absolutely adore. I have successfully survived a brutal, highly publicized global pandemic. I have proudly completed 18 months of rigorous, exhausting mandatory military service. I have bravely faced the crushing, overwhelming pressure of millions of screaming fans and ruthless industry critics. And yet today I have been entirely defeated, publicly humiliated, and violently robbed by a single winged rat. The completely straight-faced, deeply serious delivery of this incredibly dramatic, overly poetic monologue about a spilled coffee is a masterclass in pure, unintentional comedic brilliance. The absolute undeniable peak of this chaotic, unauthorized footage arrives when Jimin, completely oblivious to the active, highly volatile crime scene, practically skips into the loading bay looking for his Hyung, his face radiating pure, angelic sunshine. Jimin abruptly freezes, his bright, happy eyes darting nervously from the violently murdered coffee puddle on the floor to Yoongi's completely soulless, terrifyingly blank stare, instantly assessing the incredibly dangerous situation with the honed survival instincts of a man who has lived with Yoongi for over a decade. Number 4. Jimin. The filter malfunction. A flirty disaster. Unforgettable. Now, we move away from the chaotic backstage loading docks and step directly into the high-stakes, intensely pressure-filled environment of the final, crucial dress rehearsal taking place right on the massive, imposing main stage of the Raymond James Stadium. The heavy, notoriously humid Tampa air is thick not just with the relentless Florida heat, but with the palpable, electric anticipation of the monumental, sold-out shows that are looming just hours away. Four-part Jimin, widely celebrated across the globe as the group's breathtakingly elegant lead dancer and the undisputed king of captivating, undeniable stage presence. Rehearsals are usually a space of absolute, laser-focused perfection, a time where every single sharp angle, seductive glance, and powerful movement is meticulously crafted and flawlessly executed to an impossible standard. However, this heavily guarded, completely unscripted, and wildly hilarious leaked recording perfectly captures the exact, catastrophic moment when advanced stage technology spectacularly fails, turning Jimin's carefully cultivated, incredibly intense, and famously flirtatious performance into an absolute, unmitigated slapstick comedy disaster that had the entire touring crew howling with laughter. The rogue camera, positioned safely near the front row of the empty, echoing stadium, focuses tightly on Jimin as he prepares to run through the complex, highly anticipated solo choreography for his sultry hit track, Filter. He looks incredibly striking, dressed in a sleek, perfectly tailored, dangerously unbuttoned silk shirt that practically glows under the harsh rehearsal lights. His expression a mask of pure, intense concentration and smoldering charisma. The intricate choreography for Filter heavily relies on a series of quick, magical-seeming costume changes and the clever, highly synchronized use of a customized, high-tech microphone stand equipped with a specialized quick-release mechanism that allows Jimin to effortlessly, smoothly pull off his signature, dramatic fedora hat mid-spin, creating a moment of pure, captivating theatrical magic that leaves the fans screaming in absolute frenzy. The rehearsal track starts, the heavy, seductive bass thumping loudly through the massive stadium speakers, and Jimin is completely, beautifully in his element, executing the incredibly sharp, fluid dance moves with a mesmerizing, effortless grace that clearly demonstrates why he is considered one of the absolute best performers in the entire industry. He flashes his famous, dangerously flirtatious smirk at the empty seats, entirely embodying the alluring, captivating persona of the song. The crucial moment rapidly approaches. The intense music swells perfectly to the exact beat where the iconic hat reveal is supposed to happen. The camera tightly zooms in as Jimin executes a flawless, blindingly fast pirouette, sharply reaches out with perfectly timed, practiced precision to grab the fedora resting on the high-tech microphone stand, and forcefully, dramatically pulls. This is the exact moment everything goes spectacularly, completely wrong. Instead of the specialized quick-release mechanism smoothly detaching the hat, as flawlessly designed by the expensive engineers, the entire, heavy, solid metal upper half of the microphone stand violently and unexpectedly detaches along with it. The raw footage captures the absolute, unadulterated shock on Jimin's face, instantly replacing his smoldering, seductive smirk with an expression of pure, wide-eyed, absolute panic as he suddenly finds himself awkwardly holding not just a stylish, lightweight hat, but a long, heavy, incredibly awkward metal pole with a microphone still firmly attached to it, right in the middle of a deeply intense, dramatic dance break. He freezes dead in his tracks, his body still perfectly holding the final, dramatic pose of the choreography, but his eyes are frantically, desperately darting around the empty stadium, clearly rapidly calculating if he can somehow miraculously incorporate this massive, unexpected metal pole into the sexy, fluid dance routine without looking absolutely ridiculous. The pure, unintentional comedy brilliantly escalates as he attempts to subtly, casually try and shove the heavy metal pole back onto the base of the stand, while still desperately maintaining his intense, focused eye contact with the camera, looking exactly like a man violently struggling to quickly assemble a complicated piece of flat-pack furniture in the middle of a highly seductive, high-stakes photo shoot. His normally flawless, elegant movements are reduced to clumsy, frantic, desperate jabs as he aggressively fights with the uncooperative stage equipment, the heavy metal clanking loudly and awkwardly over the backing track. The ultimate hilarious breaking point of the recording comes when the other members, who were supposed to be quietly resting and saving their energy backstage, realize exactly what is happening on the main monitors. Suddenly, the loud, unmistakable, windshield wiper laugh of Jeon violently cuts through the stadium speakers, echoing dramatically across the empty seats, followed immediately by the chaotic, breathless giggles of Jungkook. The camera dramatically pans to show Taehyung and Jungkook practically rolling on the floor near the soundboard, absolutely crying with genuine, uncontrollable laughter at Jimin's desperate, frantic struggle to maintain his sexy persona while actively wrestling a piece of heavy metal scaffolding. Jimin, entirely unable to hold his serious composure any longer in the face of his members' merciless public mockery, finally completely breaks character. His intense, smoldering glare melts instantly into an incredibly adorable, deeply embarrassed, totally exasperated smile, his eyes squishing into tiny crescents as he just drops the heavy metal pole onto the stage floor with a loud, resigning clatter, dramatically throwing his hands up in the air in an ultimate gesture of total, complete defeat. He turns to the sound booth, violently pointing an accusing, trembling finger at his still cackling bandmates. "Stop laughing. This is highly dangerous, faulty equipment. My incredible charisma completely overpowered the weak metal," he yells into his headset microphone, his voice cracking slightly with embarrassment, instantly trying to salvage the deeply hilarious situation with a characteristic, absolutely ridiculous display of extreme, unearned confidence that completely fails to mask his blushing cheeks. This incredibly funny, deeply charming behind-the-scenes moment brilliantly showcases Jimin's incredible ability to beautifully laugh at himself. We are so used to seeing him as this untouchable, flawless, intensely perfect performer, executing impossible moves with breathtaking precision. But this raw, highly chaotic Tampa rehearsal footage wonderfully reminds us that beneath the heavy makeup, the stunning designer clothes, and the staggering global fame, he is still incredibly human, entirely capable of experiencing deeply awkward, hilariously embarrassing technical malfunctions, just like the rest of us. It beautifully highlights the genuine, comforting warmth and the unyielding, deeply supportive, and utterly chaotic bond between the members, proving that they are always exactly the first ones to loudly, relentlessly laugh at each other's misfortunes, beautifully keeping their massive egos firmly grounded in reality, no matter how huge they become. As you watch Jimin dramatically storming off the stage, fake pouting and aggressively demanding a new, non-defective microphone stand from a highly amused stagehand, you're left completely grinning from ear to ear, entirely captivated by the sheer, unscripted, highly relatable hilarity of the moment. It leaves us urgently wondering, what other spectacular, catastrophic, and completely embarrassing stage disasters are currently hiding deep within a massive, locked vaults of the tour archives, just waiting to absolutely destroy the carefully polished illusions of perfection and definitively prove that these massive, global superstars are, in fact, just as gloriously, beautifully clumsy as the rest of us? Number 3. The impromptu alien encounter, a bizarre interruption, absolutely wild. Leaving the disastrously heavy stage equipment and the ruined rehearsals behind, we now journey back into the labyrinthine, highly chaotic concrete hallways of the stadium's heavily restricted inner sanctum, where the air is thick with the scent of hairspray and the frenetic, buzzing energy of 100 staff members constantly moving at top speed. It is here, amidst the stressful, highly structured environment of the pre-show preparation, that we encounter Kim Taehyung, globally adored as V, a man whose breathtaking, incredibly sharp visuals are famously matched only by his utterly unique, fiercely independent, and notoriously unpredictable, deeply eccentric personality. V is famously known for operating entirely on his own distinct, unbothered wavelength, frequently getting completely lost in his own complex, beautiful thoughts, or becoming absolutely fascinated by the most mundane, random details that everyone else completely ignores. This spectacular, deeply bizarre, and highly unauthorized leaked recording perfectly captures a moment of pure, unadulterated Taehyung energy that is so incredibly weird, so deeply specific, and so overwhelmingly funny that it instantly cemented itself as a legendary, highly discussed moment among the touring crew, perfectly illustrating his total, baffling detachment from the stressful reality of a massive world tour. The shaky, covert camera, seemingly operated by a deeply confused wardrobe assistant, finds V sitting casually in a cramped, brightly lit makeup chair, looking absolutely stunning in a half-finished, incredibly elaborate stage outfit. His hair is perfectly, meticulously styled, his makeup is completely flawless, and he is fully prepped and entirely ready to step out and command the screaming attention of 60,000 desperate, crying fans in less than 20 minutes. However, instead of frantically going over his complex choreography, intensely warming up his rich, deep vocals, or even nervously hydrating like a normal performer preparing for a massive stadium show, V is currently completely, entirely, and utterly engrossed in an intense, completely silent, heavily unbroken staring contest with a massive, incredibly strange-looking, bright green Florida grasshopper that has somehow miraculously managed to infiltrate the heavily guarded backstage area and is currently resting casually on the edge of his brightly lit makeup mirror. The pure, unadulterated comedy of the recording lies entirely in V's absolute, unwavering, deadpan seriousness. He is leaning aggressively forward in his chair, his incredibly handsome face mere inches from the tiny, unbothered insect, his large, expressive eyes intensely narrowed in a look of profound, deeply analytical concentration, as if he is actively trying to decipher the complex, hidden secrets of the universe through this tiny, random bug. The raw footage perfectly captures the deeply confused, terrified reflections of the bustling hair and makeup team in the background mirrors, frantically running around him with various hot tools and brushes, completely, deliberately ignoring the fact that one of the biggest pop stars on the entire planet is currently having a deep, silent, spiritual communion with a random, local insect mere minutes before showtime. The incredible tension in the room is thick and hilarious. You can visibly see the stressed, heavily sweating stage manager desperately pacing back and forth in the background, aggressively checking his watch every 5 seconds, entirely unsure of how to politely interrupt this deeply bizarre, completely silent interspecies diplomatic meeting without triggering an unpredictable, eccentric reaction. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of absolute, deafening silence, V slowly, deliberately raises one perfectly manicured finger and gently, hesitantly points it directly at the tiny grasshopper. "You," he whispers, his incredibly deep, rich voice cutting sharply through the frantic backstage noise, sounding exactly like a dramatic, intense villain in a high-stakes sci-fi movie addressing a captured alien spy. "You are completely out of your designated jurisdiction. Did the management actively clear your backstage security pass? Because I am relatively certain you are severely underdressed for the highly anticipated Arirang tour opening sequence." The completely straight-faced, utterly serious delivery of this incredibly ridiculous, entirely unhinged question to a tiny bug causes the poor, stressed makeup artist actively trying to touch up his lip gloss to completely break, her hand violently shaking as she tries desperately, and entirely fails, to stifle a loud, snorting laugh, accidentally smearing the expensive product completely across his chin. He doesn't even flinch. He doesn't aggressively complain about the ruined makeup. He doesn't quickly break eye contact with the insect. He simply slowly, dramatically turns his intense, unblinking stare directly toward the camera, his face a perfect, flawless mask of completely unbothered, absolute nonchalance, entirely refusing to acknowledge the utter, pure absurdity of the situation he has just actively created. The absolute undeniable peak of this deeply weird, hilarious recording happens exactly when Jungkook suddenly bursts excitedly into the cramped dressing room, practically vibrating with intense, nervous pre-show energy, holding 2 massive, colorful energy drinks. Jungkook abruptly stops dead in his tracks, instantly taking in the highly bizarre scene. His older brother, fiercely intensely staring down a tiny green bug while a traumatized makeup artist desperately tries to scrub a massive smear of bright pink lip gloss off his chin. Jungkook doesn't even hesitate or ask a single logical question. Completely embracing the absolute chaos, he simply slowly, deliberately lowers the energy drinks, quietly walks over, and intensely joins the silent staring contest, heavily squatting down next to V's chair and aggressively locking his massive doe eyes onto the poor, deeply confused grasshopper. Jungkook whispers incredibly intensely, completely matching V's bizarre, dramatic energy. Do you think he actually knows the choreography for Run BTS? Because we honestly might need a backup dancer if Hyung completely destroys another expensive prop. The raw recording violently cuts out directly on the loud, chaotic sound of the entire, highly stressed dressing room simultaneously erupting into helpless, breathless, absolutely hysterical laughter, completely shattering the intense, stressful pre-show tension and turning the deeply bizarre moment into an unforgettable, legendary memory. This raw, unscripted footage brilliantly showcases exactly why V is so profoundly, universally loved. He possesses this incredible, entirely unique ability to effortlessly find absolute, fascinating magic and profound entertainment in the smallest, most mundane, utterly random details of life, completely ignoring the massive, overwhelming, highly structured pressure of his extraordinary, demanding reality. It is a deeply endearing, highly refreshing reminder that beneath the heavy, intimidating superstar persona, he is fundamentally just a deeply curious, wonderfully weird, and completely unbothered soul who simply prefers to actively exist entirely in his own beautiful, complex universe. It completely forces us to ask, how exactly does the highly professional, heavily stressed management team constantly deal with this level of pure, deeply eccentric unpredictability on a daily basis? And more importantly, what other bizarre, absolutely wild, and deeply hilarious encounters are currently waiting to be spectacularly uncovered in the hidden depths of the tour footage, entirely ready to completely break the internet and prove that Taehyung's unique, brilliant mind is truly the most fascinating, deeply unpredictable place on Earth? Number 2. J-Hope, the Phantom Pirate of Tampa, absolute terror, unbelievable. Shifting our intense, documentary lens completely away from the bustling, brightly lit dressing rooms and the chaotic, high-energy main stage, we now dare to aggressively plunge deep into the notoriously eerie, cavernous, and heavily shadowed underground service tunnels that wind like a terrifying, endless concrete labyrinth beneath the massive, imposing structure of the Raymond James Stadium. In stark, chilling contrast to the deafening roars of the soundcheck and the frantic, buzzing energy of the thousands of crew members working tirelessly above, this isolated, highly restricted subterranean sector is completely, uncomfortably silent, save for the ominous, rhythmic dripping of condensation from the exposed steel pipes and the unsettling, unpredictable flickering of a few dying fluorescent lights struggling desperately to pierce the thick, oppressive Florida humidity. It is precisely within this creepy, horror movie-esque setting that we intimately locate Young Hoseok, universally adored by millions across the globe, as J-Hope, the group's radiant, literal human sunshine, their fiercely intimidating, perfectionist dance captain, and undeniably, the single most easily terrified, spectacularly jumpy individual to ever grace the international music industry. This highly classified, deeply hilarious, and completely unauthorized piece of leaked security footage brilliantly captures the exact, heart-stopping moment when J-Hope's legendary, well-documented cowardice aggressively collides with the bizarre, completely unexpected local history of the Tampa Stadium, resulting in an absolute, unmitigated masterpiece of pure, unadulterated comedic terror. The grainy, heavily shadowed security camera footage begins by showing J-Hope wandering entirely alone down a particularly dark, heavily abandoned concrete corridor, having bravely decided to embark on a highly ambitious, completely misguided solo mission to locate a rumored, heavily stocked vending machine containing a specific, deeply desired brand of local Florida orange juice. He looks incredibly nervous, his typically bright, joyful face drawn into a tight, highly suspicious grimace, his eyes darting frantically from side to side like a highly alert, terrified meerkat actively anticipating a deadly, unseen predator attack. He is aggressively clutching his expensive, custom-tailored designer jacket tightly around his chest for imaginary, completely useless protection, tiptoeing slowly and deliberately across the cold concrete floor, flinching violently at every single tiny, imperceptible creak of the massive stadium structure settling above him in the heat. The sheer, terrifying suspense of the silent footage is absolutely palpable. You can practically feel his rapidly accelerating heartbeat echoing loudly through the screen as he tentatively, hesitantly turns a sharp, dark corner into a completely forgotten, dusty storage bay. Suddenly, the absolute, undeniable peak of the horror spectacularly unfolds in real time. Looming massively in the heavy, suffocating shadows, standing entirely still and terrifyingly silent, is a colossal, 8-foot-tall, deeply menacing figure wearing what appears to be a tattered, ancient pirate captain's uniform, complete with a massive, terrifying hooked hand, glowing, reflective glass eyes, and a horrifyingly large, aggressively plumed tricorn hat. This terrifying apparition is, in reality, merely a massive, heavily decommissioned, utterly harmless animatronic mascot prop previously utilized by the local Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team, tragically forgotten and carelessly abandoned by the stadium staff in the dark depths of the restricted storage area. However, to the highly imaginative, utterly terrified mind of young Hosiok, currently operating on pure, unadulterated fear and absolutely zero logical reasoning, he has just aggressively stumbled directly into a hostile, deeply cursed encounter with the vengeful, bloodthirsty ghost of a centuries-old Florida pirate who has come to drag him into the abyss. The security camera perfectly captures the exact, catastrophic fraction of a second when J-Hope's brain completely, utterly short-circuits. He instantly freezes entirely solid, his beautiful eyes widening to impossible, cartoonish proportions, his jaw dropping so incredibly hard it practically unhinges, fully paralyzed by a profound, soul-crushing terror that physically roots him to the spot. The previously silent footage is suddenly, violently interrupted by the deafening, utterly chaotic audio track recorded by a rogue documentary cameraman who had been quietly trailing him from safe distance. J-Hope lets out a scream so incredibly loud, so devastatingly high-pitched, and so profoundly, spectacularly terrified that it sounds exactly like a massive, startled pterodactyl violently breaking the sound barrier. It is a scream of pure, unfiltered, primal agony that actively threatens to completely shatter every single expensive camera lens and eardrum in the immediate vicinity. He doesn't simply run away. His entire physical body actively rejects the basic laws of gravity. He forcefully launches himself violently backward in a flailing, chaotic explosion of flying limbs, aggressively tripping over his own expensive sneakers and spectacularly collapsing in a tangled, deeply ungraceful heap directly onto the dirty concrete floor, frantically scrambling backward like a terrified crab while intensely pointing a violently trembling finger at the silent, completely unmoving plastic pirate captain. The pure, unadulterated comedy brilliantly escalates to completely unimaginable heights when the motion sensor lights in the storage bay, suddenly triggered by his chaotic, flailing panic and violent movements, aggressively flick on, fully, mercilessly illuminating the sad, heavily dusty, slightly cross-eyed plastic face of the terrifying animatronic. J-Hope, still violently hyperventilating on the floor, heavily clutching his chest as if actively experiencing a massive, terrifying cardiac event, slowly stops screaming, his terrified brain finally, painfully processing the deeply embarrassing, utterly ridiculous reality of the situation. He just stares blankly at the plastic pirate, then slowly, agonizingly looks directly up at the mercilessly recording documentary camera, his flawless face completely flushed with an intense, burning mixture of profound, life-saving relief and absolutely crushing, world-ending embarrassment. I entirely thought it was going to actively plunder my soul and take me out to sea. He breathlessly stammers into the microphone, his voice still violently shaking, aggressively trying and utterly failing to instantly recover even a single shred of his highly cultivated, intensely cool, intimidating rapper persona. But the absolute, undeniable crowning glory of this legendary, chaotic recording arrives exactly 10 seconds later when the heavy, echoing sound of highly aggressive, uncontrollable wheezing laughter suddenly fills the damp hallway. The camera aggressively pans around to reveal Jeon and Jungkook, who had apparently actively followed their beloved Hyung down into the dark tunnels specifically to loudly jump scare him. Currently absolutely incapacitated, literally rolling on the dirty concrete floor together, tightly clutching their stomachs and crying real, genuine tears of absolute hysteria. They didn't even have to execute their carefully planned, elaborate prank. The completely inanimate, dusty local Tampa sports history had aggressively done all the incredibly terrifying, heavy lifting for them. J-Hope, finally realizing he has been completely, utterly humiliated in front of his merciless, chaotic brothers, dramatically drops his head back onto the cold floor in total, complete defeat, letting out a heavy, tragic groan that echoes loudly and pitifully through the empty corridors. This brilliant, incredibly chaotic footage perfectly encapsulates the profoundly enduring, deeply lovable duality of J-Hope. The incredibly beautiful fact that the exact same man who can fiercely, intimidatingly command a massive stadium of thousands with his sharp, aggressive, flawless dance moves and intensely powerful stage presence is simultaneously deeply terrified of a stationary, dusty piece of plastic local history is exactly why the entire world absolutely, unconditionally adores him. Number 1. Jungkook. The Great Golf Cart Heist, a furious escape, absolute chaos. We have finally arrived at the absolute, undisputed pinnacle of our countdown, the ultimate, most spectacularly chaotic, incredibly unhinged, and universally legendary moment captured on film during the entire, exhausting Tampa, floor-to-stop of this historic world tour. And naturally, it involves the absolute wildest, most dangerously unpredictable force of nature in the entire global music industry, Jungkook. Globally revered and universally feared as the Golden Magne, Jungkook is a man who is famously, intensely known for effortlessly excelling at absolutely everything he touches, possessing the terrifying, boundless physical energy of an elite, peak-condition Olympic athlete perfectly combined with the fearless, adrenaline-fueled soul of a professional Hollywood stunt double. He is a man who regularly, casually treats highly dangerous, complex physical challenges like mere child's play, completely oblivious to the intense, crushing anxiety of his heavily stressed management team who desperately try, day in and day out, to keep their most valuable, multi-million-dollar asset in one functional, uninjured piece. This incredibly rare, deeply unauthorized, highly classified, and phenomenally hilarious leak security recording brilliantly captures the exact, heart-stopping moment when the grueling, heavily structured reality of a massive, high-stakes stadium tour violently collides with Jungkook's deeply ingrained, absolutely unstoppable urge to turn absolutely any mundane situation into an intense, high-octane action movie sequence. The scene is perfectly, vividly set in the immediate, deeply exhausting aftermath of a brutal, 3-hour-long, highly technical dress rehearsal under the unforgiving, sweltering, utterly oppressive Florida sun. The heavy, notoriously thick Tampa humidity actively hangs in the air of the cavernous, concrete backstage loading dock like a wet blanket, leaving the entire, massive production crew looking profoundly drained, heavily sweating and desperately praying for an early wrap to the agonizing day. Amidst this vast sea of profound exhaustion, perfectly parked near a massive, towering stack of black touring road cases, sits a heavy-duty, customized electro-production golf cart. This specialized, high-speed, reinforced vehicle is an absolute, vital necessity for the frantic, heavily stressed stage managers to rapidly navigate the seemingly endless, labyrinthine miles of the Raymond James Stadium corridors. Crucially and absolutely disastrously, a deeply exhausted, completely unaware senior production manager has tragically made the fatal error of leaving the keys dangling invitingly in the ignition, inadvertently creating an irresistible, incredibly dangerous, shiny trap for the youngest member. The covert, grainy documentary camera perfectly catches Jungkook casually wandering into the dimly lit loading bay, his muscular, imposing physique clad in an incredibly expensive, perfectly tailored, but heavily sweat-drenched black designer stage outfit, casually sipping from a massive, gallon-sized bottle of ice water. The exact, terrifying fraction of a second his large, observant, doe-like eyes lock directly onto the abandoned, perfectly functional vehicle, a highly dangerous, intensely mischievous spark violently ignites within them, burning brighter than the stadium stage lights. You can practically see the complex, high-speed gears violently shifting in his adrenaline junkie brain. He instantly forgets his profound physical exhaustion. He entirely ignores the strict, rigorous, heavily enforced safety protocols of the international tour. In a remarkably swift, incredibly athletic motion that completely defies his tired state and the basic laws of gravity, Jungkook aggressively vaults directly over the side of the heavy cart, landing perfectly in the driver's seat with the intense, laser-focused precision of a seasoned Formula One racing champion settling into his cockpit. But the absolute, undeniable masterpiece of this chaotic, unauthorized recording is that he absolutely refuses to embark on this dangerous, highly illegal mission alone. With a terrifying, completely unhinged grin spreading rapidly across his face, he violently points a commanding, authoritative finger at a deeply unsuspecting, entirely innocent Seagull, who is currently peacefully trying to eat a small, local Tampa pastry while minding his own business near a wardrobe rack. "Young, get in. We ride at dawn." Jungkook aggressively screams, his powerful voice echoing loudly and violently across the cold concrete walls. Before Jeon can even fully process the terrifying, unhinged command, let alone formulate a logical, coherent refusal, Jungkook aggressively grabs the collar of his expensive silk shirt and forcefully, violently yanks the loudly protesting, wildly flailing eldest member directly into the cramped passenger seat, immediately slamming his foot down heavily on the accelerator before the older man is even fully seated. The raw, unfiltered audio of the recording instantly explodes into absolute, unadulterated, deafening chaos. The heavy electric golf cart violently lurches forward with terrifying, neck-snapping torque, the small, highly pressurized tires loudly squealing in intense, agonizing protest against the slick, polished concrete floor as Jungkook aggressively yanks the steering wheel, launching them directly into the dark, incredibly narrow, highly restricted subterranean service tunnels of the stadium at maximum capacity. What follows is a breathtaking, utterly hilarious, and deeply terrifying high-speed chase that completely rivals the most intense, multi-million-dollar Hollywood blockbusters. The camera aggressively shakes and blurs as the rogue documentary cameraman violently sprints after them, desperately trying to keep the chaotic, speeding vehicle in frame while fighting for his own life. Jungkook is aggressively hunched over the tiny plastic steering wheel, his beautiful face set into a mask of pure, intense, psychotic concentration, fully biting his lower lip as he violently drifts the heavy cart around impossibly tight, dangerous concrete blind corners, actively treating the narrow stadium hallways exactly like a high-stakes, professional Tokyo drift racing track. Beside him, the situation is absolutely, utterly catastrophic. Jeon has completely, utterly surrendered to pure, primal, animalistic terror. The eldest member is aggressively clutching the flimsy plastic dashboard with a white-knuckled, death grip intensity, his eyes squeezed tightly shut as he unleashes a continuous, incredibly high-pitched, soul-shattering shriek that sounds exactly like a boiling industrial kettle desperately crying for mercy. Jungkook, you absolute maniac. I am far too incredibly handsome to die in a highly embarrassing golf cart accident in a Florida basement. Jeon screams violently over the loud, whining hum of the overtaxed electric engine, his voice completely cracking in profound, existential despair. The pure, unadulterated comedy actively escalates to astronomical, unprecedented heights as they aggressively weave through the heavily populated backstage staging areas. The chaotic footage perfectly captures the deeply confused, utterly terrified faces of the massive touring crew, violently diving out of the way into the walls holding expensive, fragile racks of custom designer clothes and highly delicate sound equipment as the screaming, high-speed cart tears through the narrow corridors like a terrifying, unhinged tornado of pure destruction. They aggressively speed past a deeply exhausted Namjoon, who simply stops dead in his tracks, heavily drops his massive clipboard to the floor in slow motion, and deeply massages his temples, letting out a profound, universe-carrying sigh of complete defeat, absolutely refusing to actively deal with or even acknowledge the intense, life-threatening chaos his youngest member has aggressively unleashed upon his highly structured world. The absolute, magnificent, heart-stopping climax of this spectacular heist occurs as Jungkook aggressively approaches a solid concrete dead end near the heavy catering bay, traveling at absolutely maximum, highly illegal speeds. The trailing documentary camera perfectly braces for a catastrophic, extremely expensive, and highly painful metallic crash. But Jungkook, fully operating on sheer, unadulterated, superhuman golden magne reflexes, violently slams on the brakes and aggressively rips the steering wheel completely to the left.